turn me round, let nobody turn me round.
Slick? Not Slick?
No, this is Blind Boys of Alabama.
Oh.
They're great, right? I'm very inspired by the whole idea of when we do the action, you know, and when we get up on the footwall, everybody's singing, you know, down by the riverside, and we shall not be moved. Because I think it can be very powerful. And it also gives people inspiration. And when you sing, you're not quite as cold.
You need to share what you do.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot. Kevin? You on an injured list there, Sean?
I'm injured.
I saw you on RT a couple nights ago.
Oh yeah, RT's good. Yeah. What was that on? That was on WikiLeaks or?
We're meeting here one day before President Obama informs us of his conclusions after the advice he's been getting recently on progress in Afghanistan. We're being told already, not as a surprise, to expect that he will be very reassured by what he's reading, that he's on the right course, and that we need to keep the escalation, if not higher, at least keep the escalation that he ordered 1 year ago going, because, as he told troops, reassuring the troops, they were making progress, they were on the way to a victory, and they were protecting American lives at home. I regard that last assurance as a lie, as the big lie, in the sense of Joseph Goebbels, who used to say that big lies had more possibility of being believed, were more readily believed, because people just weren't prepared to imagine that they were being lied to that extent. I knew Richard Holbrooke when he was a 22-year-old, 23-year-old province rep and political officer in Vietnam when I was there in 65, 67. I knew him to be very knowledgeable about Vietnam. Not everybody has mentioned that he spoke Vietnamese. He'd had language training, and there weren't too many Americans who spoke Vietnamese. He'd been all over Vietnam, and he knew that war that year and in years to come as well as anybody in the country. As a young man, very smart guy who understood that war. Richard Holbrooke was the person that I made a special trip to. I hadn't been planning to go to Casablanca. I was elsewhere in the country. And I made that special trip to spend a day with him to try to persuade him to come out against the war in the way that I knew he believed. His views and mine on the war at the time I released the Pentagon Papers were indistinguishable. And his knowledge was such that I knew he could be a very powerful figure on that. If he were to come out and he said, "No, Dan, I've put that behind me. I've left Vietnam. That's my answer to the problem. You know, I'm trying to do something else here, seriously." And he did not, pardon me for saying it, but jeopardize his career by taking that step. And as really nobody else did either. He wasn't different from the others. But so when I heard him being quoted as Obama's representative and Hillary Clinton's representative, saying we would make progress and saying optimistic things, I didn't know. Well, I thought, as before, he's saying what he has to say, but he can't believe that. I cannot believe that he can have blinded himself so much to what he and I knew about Vietnam at the time. That's what I thought. So I was very interested, finally, in the book by Bob Woodward. It's from that book that I learned what I quoted to you earlier, that General Lute, General Jim Jones, General Eikenberry all opposed the escalation, said it was against our interests, against the view of Petraeus and McChrystal, who were in effect isolated in that view. Also, Rahm Emanuel very interestingly opposed it, and Richard Holbrooke, privately. But he worked for Hillary Clinton, as it said, who favored the escalation. She was his boss, and so that totally limited, as in the way I've just described, what he could say publicly, or even to the president, meaning, as I've just said, what it means for such people he had to lie. Had to lie? Well, he did lie. His job, which I'm sure he felt was in the interest of the country as well as of himself, required him to lie about what he saw the prospects were. On page 333, by the man who just died, the giant who was being eulogized so much, is, I think, comes very close to the statement that he's quoted as being his last words before he went under anesthetic for what came to be a 22-hour operation in which he died. And the last words he said were, "You've got to get us out. You've got to end the war in Afghanistan." Here is the last quote of this chapter in Obama's war. Perhaps, page 333, perhaps the most pessimistic view came from Richard Holbrooke. "It can't work," he said. End of chapter. End of story for Richard. But at least he went out having said some true words. First to Bob Woodward a year ago, and to his relatives as he went on the operating table. Thoreau said, "Cast your whole vote, not a strip of paper merely, but your whole influence." Rarely done. We'll be putting our bodies on the line in a small way. Bradley Manning is facing life in prison, probably, for his act of civil disobedience, which was exactly equivalent to mine. I say that to refute those people who say Pentagon Papers good, WikiLeaks bad. Horseshit. And Bradley Manning took this same risk I did for the same reason in the same kind of war. So it's for us to put our bodies with him and to end this atrocious war.
I'm a veteran of the Iraq War, a war that's continuing to this day, a war that has definitely not ended. I went to that war in March of 2003 as part of the initial invasion, and I went supportive of the war, believing we were doing the right thing, believing we'd be helping the Iraqi people, believing we'd be defending the United States from this imminent threat. So I went in with all these illusions, and it was my first-hand experiences on the ground that showed this to be a complete lie, that showed that the only reasons, the only motivation for the Iraq War, everything behind it, was about profits for a small group of people. It was about stealing the resources of that country. It was about seizing a country that was independent, that was in control of its own destiny, a country that was off limits to U.S. banks and corporations, and that was unacceptable to Wall Street and to the rich in the United States, which is why they had embarked on a long and genocidal strategy of sanctions and bombings towards the people of Iraq, which culminated with the 2003 invasion, which I was a part of, and which gave me the true perspective on U.S. foreign policy. And I'm happy to say that I'm joined here today and will be joined tomorrow by many other veterans of the war in Iraq and the war in Afghanistan who have had the same realization that I've had, like so many are waking up every single day and who are, instead of fighting for U.S. imperialism, instead putting their bodies on the line and being at the forefront in the fight against U.S. imperialism.
That's why I repeat myself, because I'm not that concise and sharp and getting things out in 2 seconds. Yeah, you can say what it's 2 seconds sound like it's very good, but I'm not that good. One point, you're talking to yourself. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Right. Right. And this, Bradley Manning.
We shall not be moved, just like a tree that's standing by the water. We shall not be moved. Stopping endless war, we shall not be moved. Stopping endless war, we shall not be moved, just like a tree that's standing by the water. We shall not be moved.
Working hard for peace.
I think Dan Ellsberg was coming to.
I came in, I'll tell you the flashback I actually had. It was a night, it was about April 28th or so, 29th, 1971. And on this particular night, I was at a meeting at a rally at Brandeis University, and what reminded me was people on the aisles, people hanging from the chandeliers, just like this, and it's students mainly, and I was the last speaker, and I found myself getting up in front of this very crowded group and asking how many people there had seen the movie Little Big Man. I said, you know, in Little Big Man, you remember, they'd all just seen it. I said, the slogan that went right through it is the saying of the Sioux, the Lakota Sioux, "Come, brothers, it's a good day to die." And I said, you know, it's never a good day to die, but I think May 1st is a good day to get arrested in Washington.
What's it like to be with a whole bunch of vets? I mean, all wars and everything else.
It feels good.
Does it really?
It really does.
Yeah. I think there's a real support and stuff. And
all brothers.
All brothers, really. And
yeah.
Also, a lot of vets, you know, believe in these crazy wars, but when you get a bunch of vets who really want to stop the war, in some sense for patriotic reasons, do you think this has anything to do with patriotism, you being out here today, or what?
I think my activism is the best form of patriotism. I consider myself a full-blooded patriot.
Right.
I'm still, right now defending, living up to the oath that I signed. I'm defending the country against enemies both foreign and domestic, and the enemy is here. And
Right. So a lot of us are older, but you're a young guy. Are you paying the price for speaking out at this point, or not?
I've had some people in my unit that have come down on me for it, but no repercussions. This is my first civil disobedience, so
yeah. Well, we got to take advantage of this free society, don't we, to speak our minds as veterans and as people in the service. So.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, sir.
I think that this is a very important action to show the American people that there's many people out there, veterans included, that are willing to rise up against a brutal occupation and a brutal situation which puts millions of people in poverty.
Those who resist here today with nonviolence are the last thin line of defense between a civil society and its disintegration. Hope has a cost. Hope is not comfortable or easy. Hope requires personal risk. It is not about the right attitude or peace of mind. Hope is action. Hope is doing something. The more futile, the more useless, the more irrelevant and incomprehensible an act of rebellion is, the vaster and more potent hope becomes. Hope never makes sense. Hope is weak, unorganized, and absurd. Hope, which is always nonviolent, exposes in its powerlessness the lies, fraud, and coercion employed by the state.
Respecting human rights, we shall not be moved. Respecting human rights, we shall not be moved. Just like a tree that's standing by the wall.